Okay, so in this next section, we're going to take a look at a variety of tools that are in use by a variety of faculty members from WSU. The first up is going to be Steve Lampa. He's going to be talking about Top Hat.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Top Hat. It's a bring your own device kind of cloud-based learning platform. You might refer to it as an audience response system too, right? But it's a mobile audience response system that allows you to engage with the audience. So I teach in both the integrative physiology and neuroscience program at the undergraduate level, and I've been teaching in the vet school for the last 14 years, just a little background. And so I've really used audience response systems probably for about 6 years. I used iClicker, and then this is kind of iClicker on steroids, is the way I think of it in some ways. It's a lot more engaging platform to work with the students. So what can Top Hat do? Oh, yes?
We can't, I just can't hear you. You need to talk into the mic a little better.
So is that better? Can you hear better now? No? Yes?
Can hear you fine.
We can hear.
Oh, sorry.
We can hear. We can hear in Everett too, but we can't see content. If you're sharing content, we can't see that yet.
Okay. Well, yeah, we should be sharing content. Hold on. Let me.
Seeing a blue screen in Spokane.
Is it on here?
Oh, and then the microphone, you moved it kind of close to the laptop, and I can hear the laptop fan. I don't know if that's an issue. Thanks.
Yeah, hold on. We're working on it. So it should. Yeah, there you go. Sending computer. So going back to the first slide, everybody, you can see the screen now? Everybody's good? All right. Okay, so again, so this is Top Hat. This is a bring your own device learning platform for engagement. So I think of it more than just a clicker or clicker activity, right? It can do so much more. It's so much more powerful. And so basically, so what can Top Hat do, right? So in-class questions, bring your own device. It's an audience response system, just like Poll Everywhere, Reef, all of those different things. It can do all of those activities. You can have it be anonymous. You can have it not be anonymous. You can have it graded or not. You can tell it to use it for participation points. You can tell it to use it for correctness or some combination thereof. You can have synchronous or asynchronous, so you could actually use it self-paced, or you can basically set up questions every 30 seconds if you want to kind of even give it like as a little quiz. And then you have the option of, after your presentations, to leave it open for review or for homework if you have some other questions you want to add to it. So it'll do all of those different type of activities, and I've used it for all those different things for in-class questions. Out-of-class questions, like I said, you can actually have them do homework. You can have them, you can make like a little quiz outside of class, if you wanted to have something that you thought was that important that you needed them to try to delve a little deeper into. And then you could have it actually either that could be graded or not graded, depending on how you wanted to set it up. Attendance feature, if you're just going to use it for attendance, there's so many better things to use it. I mean, this is not for attendance, this is for engagement. There's another feature that's called Pages that's actually in the Top Hat program, and this actually allows you to author full documents that the students can look at on their bring your own device, and you can embed questions, you can put more complex content. You could put passages if you were doing some type of like clinical scenario, you could have them read that, and then you could actually have them work through it and have questions kind of lined up. And it could be even like a board, like board exam type of ish questions, right? So you could have like a scenario and then you could have the different options there. You could even use it as publishing for full electronic documents. Top Hat actually has a publishing piece that they actually now have a marketplace where you can actually get information published. So what are like my experiences? So I teach in both the veterinary medicine curriculum as well as the undergraduates. And I teach in VM 511, which is a small animal anatomy course. And I was the course director this fall. And we use the questions in a lecture, in a standard didactic lecture format for basically just thinking about key concepts and even, but also even more so is like encouraging peer interactions, right? So putting a question up there, but then giving them time to discuss it and then have them answer it, right? So you can do a little think, pair, share type of activities or some type of more engaged activity. We use it in the anatomy lab in a way that's kind of interesting. We actually have peer teaching experiences where we have questions, and they actually use Top Hat to answer these questions on a daily basis. Like, did somebody show in anatomy, we have our students dissect a certain area, but then our class is divided into half, and so the second half comes in, and they actually get shown by a presenter what they've been doing. And then we actually have them give peer feedback on how their presentation skills were, did they use the right kind of words in communication and things like that. So that's another way that I've used it in the VM 511 course. And then also we have just daily kind of questions just to see if they're getting some key concepts. And then in my undergraduate neuroanatomy course, I use it as on a weekly basis because the labs are weekly. And what we try to do is have kind of an integrative portion of the laboratory and lecture material and ask them pretty much lower level Bloom's taxonomy type of questions, right? So more identification, describe, having multiple choice questions, short answers. One thing I really like about Top Hat, and I'll show that, is you have the available for what's called a click on target question, which is really nice as an anatomist where you can actually ask them to point to something for you and it allows you to do that. So, okay, so we used this last year in Neuro 404, and I actually have a little bit of kind of Likert data, right, that shows like what was the student's perception of using this, right? So we basically asked, do you think it was effective for integrating both lab and lecture? And you can see the majority of the students either strongly agreed or agreed. And then thinking about stimulation of discussion with their peers, as well as even recommending that we use it again, right? So we actually did get a little bit of data that supported that, what we were doing. especially because it was basically our pilot study using this in this undergraduate course this way. And then there was one other question we asked, and if it's like, did they use it as a review for lab and lecture for their studying? Not really, but that gets to the whole idea that there's a metacognitive part, and they probably didn't quite get to that level and understand why it's important to ask themselves these questions. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually show you what the Top Hat platform may look like. Oops. Why can't I get out of here? And, oops, sorry. Where's the, what's that? Oh, the screens. Oh, there it is. Okay. So now I'm actually going to show you, is it capturing this or is it probably in the other window? Sorry. Oh, I see. Okay. So now I'm actually going to show you what Top Hat looks like, and I don't know how many people have used Top Hat. Anybody? Okay, so I guess not. Okay, so this is the instructor screen, right? When you go into the login, you can create your own course, right? And creating a course doesn't cost the faculty anything. It's basically a student subscription price. And the student subscription price is about $20 a semester, I think, but it's $75 for 5 years. So, and those prices may not quite be right. I didn't look those up, but it's something. Yeah, so it's something like that. And so they can get a license basically for their entire either professional school or undergraduate or however it's going to be used. And so these are the different courses that I've created. And so I'm going to go to the Spring Technology Forum. So I'm going to enter my course. And this is where you create all your materials. And so you can actually put your slides, so the slides I just showed you, I could actually go in and actually present my slides that I just did out of this, right? So that's one thing you can do. You could actually embed whatever your slides are into this. And then you can embed questions as well. So that's one feature. So what does it look like if you do a lecture, right? And how do these get presented and how do they come out? I will say that one important thing to think about when you're doing these type of activities is the technology is supporting the pedagogy. You're not using the technology to, don't be overwhelmed with the technology. The pedagogy has to support it. And so you need to make sure that you're doing those things like practicing and making good questions and formatting these type of things. So this is actually, okay, so these are the slides that I present the very first day of class for the vet students. And the first question that I always ask is, have you ever used a clicker before, right? So, or some type of audience response system. And I think that, so that's what you need to find out. You need to find out where your students are. You need to find out where their engagement is with that. And then, so if if you all had like access to this as a student, you could answer this question, you know, A or B, right? And it pops up onto a mobile device, it pops up onto a tablet, it pops up, you could actually access it with a laptop, all those different ways. And then you can basically, you know, look at their responses. So to see if students are engaging in this, you could see if you have 95 students, you know, are you getting everybody to engage in the question? If not, you can kind of prompt them a little bit, or so this is just kind of one of the simpler type of questions you can use. And then, so this is kind of, the animal matrix is something we used for the MBTI type of thing. But one of our people kind of, the Myers-Briggs evaluation for extrovert, introvert. So we use these animal matrix. So on the extrovert side, you know, would be like the lion and the monkey. The introvert side would be the owl and the golden retriever. And so they went through basically our summer kind of introduction to vet school activity, and they got all this information. And so this is just another way to do this. But this is a question that's called click on target. And so they could actually point to one of these images to indicate what their animal matrix was. And then you can, you know, so then there is, oops, come on. So then you could ask, like, you know, a little more in-depth multiple choice question. You can ask, and then if you were talking about, come on. Then you could talk about, like if you're talking about concepts, then you could throw a concept question in here. The nice thing that I like about Top Hat is you could put images in there as well. So it's actually got, the authoring part of this program is really nice. And oops. This is weird. Uh-oh. What did I do? Oh, it's the extended. Where'd it go? Sorry, I just want to, yeah. Oh, there it is. Oops, sorry. Okay, so that's kind of the type of questions you can embed. And how would you actually go about making one of these questions, right? It's, all right, now where's the cursor go again? Oh. Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. Sorry, the screen's on extended view, but I'm looking at a laptop that's only about 12 inches across. So I'm having trouble navigating between the screen and the laptop here. So if you were going to create a question or create any content, oops, right? So you can make questions, you can make discussions, you can upload slides, you can upload a file if you want to put a file into it. You can use just the attendance feature, which I said is probably the most boring part of Top Hat. But what I wanted to show you real quickly in the last couple minutes is this Pages feature. You can actually create entire like chapters if you were doing like a lab or something like that. And so this is from our undergraduate neuroanatomy course, and it's basically the lab exercises that we used. And we authored this. We did all this in conjunction with Top Hat. And so it's actually just another feature that you can do, and this is called the Pages feature. And this is it's a really powerful piece, and they still get this on their phone, they get this on their tablet, so they can basically have their lab guide on their phone or their tablet or anything that you're asking them to do. But then the other thing you can do is you can actually then embed questions like in the lab guide, right? So then they could use these as a post-lab assessment. And depending on how you wanted to integrate those questions, right? There's different ways of doing that. And so we had a little help from the Top Hat people to put all this in there, but really it's pretty simple. It's cut and paste, and there's a lot of really just dropping the images into that type of format. And so and what I just showed you can actually be exported as a PDF as well, so they could actually have the hard copy of it if you want them to have that ability, right? So that's just another way, another thing you can do that you can use it for. And some of these others are just other examples of questions that I've used. There's a gradebook feature, which it does integrate with our Blackboard, but I honestly haven't really done that much. I've used it more exporting into Excel and then taking that Excel and putting that into Blackboard. So I haven't tried to mesh the two learning management systems together, but I know it does it, but I just don't know. I just am inexperienced with that part of this. And like your students basically get a join code to join that class, right? So you can send that out as an email. You can have Top Hat actually send them out an invite when they get like the list of all of they'll get the student ID numbers or the official roster, and then Top Hat will actually make an invite and give them all the instructions on how to sign up for it and all those type of things. So that's really kind of all I have, except for one last thing I want to show you is, again, this is kind of as a Pages document. And so what are the Top Hat takeaways, right? So I think that this maintains engagement of the students so much better than iClicker did, right? And that was my only other experience with a audience response system. But it's only as useful as how much time you kind of put into it, right? So the pedagogy has to come from the instructor. Top Hat doesn't do the pedagogy for you. There are multiple applications, and I just showed you a few of the basic ones. And then it takes practice and preparation beforehand. The learning curve is there, but it's not really steep because it's pretty straightforward. And I will tell you that they have some of the best technical support, that if you have a question and you're working on your class and you can't figure it out and you go to their help button, somebody's responding to you within 20 to 30 minutes. And usually faster than that, usually 5 minutes. And the other thing about Top Hat that I've really appreciated is that it's evolving and it's evolving because of faculty input. It's not evolving because of the technology, because the technology is doing a really good job, but we're asking them to do these certain things for us. And Top Hat is really receptive to working with faculty, taking ideas. So anyways, that is pretty much it as far as, I think my time's out, but so I'll take some questions from anybody. And we'll make sure these slides are available to people because I have a few references. I have a reference slide that if anybody wants to look at it, there's like,
We had a question in Everett.
yeah.
You had a couple slides where you had.
Just in general, as a user.
Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. You had a couple slides that had a cell phone number that you could just text.
Yeah.
Does it require that the person is signed up for the system, or can anybody text that number?
No, so anybody, or you need to be signed up in Top Hat to be able to do that, right? So that you can't just have an SMS that gets a response, I guess. So it can go into the, I think you could probably do it, but as far as like in the classroom, honestly, I think we had one student the first year, and like a week into class, they went and got a smartphone. Because the text response, it's pretty hard to do, especially on some of those questions that aren't just a multiple choice, right? If there's a click on target, they can't do that. And there's things like matching and short answer that it requires you to kind of enter it and type it in. So yes, there is that. If you were just using it, like probably when it first came out for attendance, and you could like go in with the SMS thing and say, yes, I'm here today. But if you use the rest of the questions the way they've evolved, I don't think it's really recommended that you try to text in your responses.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi there. I kind of have just a general question. I had a chance to speak with a representative about a year ago about Top Hat, and it sort of went off my radar because I wasn't so sure if it had application so much in an asynchronous environment. And I heard you refer a little bit to some of the features, but if you were just generally speaking to think about if that was the platform primarily, would this be useful? Do you see enough utility in that?
So I guess it
setting?
depends on how you want to get that set up and how you want to try to see about using it. So the way that we use it asynchronously is that they don't have to answer questions in the same order, but they could also do things like outside of class, and you can have exercises that aren't like a didactic in-class type of lecture or exercise. When you open a question in Top Hat, it stays open until you close it, and so however you want it, you'd want to approach that. But I guess I haven't used it as much in that way, other than it's asynchronous in that we let the students answer it at their own pace, but it's maybe not quite as asynchronous as like how the responses are. I guess I'd have to understand how that would work. So I'm sorry I can't help.
That's okay. Thanks.
Yep. Is there any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, thanks, Steve. So up next, we'll have Lori Bailey from Spokane talking about Join Prof.
Can we get my PowerPoint screen and camera? Yep. Goes back in. Hi, I'm Lori Bailey from the College of Nursing, and I love that we're doing this because any way that we can find more creative ways to pull our students into the classroom other than just a lecture format, to me, is brilliant. And one of the tools that I use is a tool called Join Prof. And I actually, because I like the learner-centered, engaged environment, if you have a device with you, if you go to joinprof.com/ELAYBE, you'll actually be into my moderated input. So I can kind of show you how it is I use it. But let me tell you why I chose Join Prof. So I teach in a classroom where in front of me here in Spokane, I have 80 plus students. And then my classroom goes across the state and I engage with students. I have 30 this semester in Tri-Cities and 20 in Yakima. And so I've got a live classroom across 3 different sites. And as you can imagine, that can pose some difficulties, particularly when my classroom is one where there's very little actual lecture. We do a lot of case-based learning. And because I do something more problem-based and I'm able to circulate in Spokane, it leaves those folks in Yakima and Tri-Cities without some of the same kind of contact. The other reason I really like this is it allows students to anonymously ask me questions. And when you get a classroom full of ESL students or the occasional student who has emailed me at the beginning of the semester, please don't call my name out loud in class, I'll totally faint dead away. It gives those students a way to still be engaged. And when I was a youngster, I was very shy, so I understand. I grew out of it, mind you. Haven't been accused of that in many years. And so going into Join Prof, there are a couple of ways I can use this. This is predominantly a way for me to allow students to ask me questions so that if we are talking about something, or if I am presenting a small piece of lecture material, they can ask me questions in real time and I can engage with that content. And the cool thing about the student-centered classroom, you have to be ready to take the discussion wherever the students need it to go. And I really like how this does that. So it does allow me to do polls. I can launch polls, and that's kind of cool because on the fly, if I'm teaching something a little more abstract that students are having trouble grasping, I can throw a poll up and kind of gauge whether or not they're understanding. In terms of moderating input, this is kind of what my screen would look like. And so if the screen in front of you, if somebody wanted to put in a question, I always like nice comments. So this one, great job, Lori. I'll throw that one up on the screen. It allows you to control, because on occasion, for instance, the other day we were talking about in my classroom bias in healthcare and how that might impact patient outcomes. And one of my students decided that I was maybe being a little too liberal, and they made that comment. I left that one off. Where I had something that was maybe a little more constructive, we put up to, where somebody was asking a question about, well, what about personal responsibility? To me, is a much more engaging question than you're showing your liberal bias, for what it's worth. So I put the one about personal responsibility because I think they were trying to ask the same question. So it does give me some control over what students actually see. So you can see on my screen here, I've got a number of questions up, but if I go to what the students can see, it's only what I've posted up there on the screen. And so I do like that. I mean, you lose some control in a student-centered classroom, but I do like being able to, at least make sure that the discussion stays on some sort of track where we're going to actually get to an outcome. And then I like the polling feature because they can actually see in real time how the poll is going. So for instance, recently in my medical surgical nursing course, we talked about acid-base balance. And we put some problems up on the PowerPoint screen, and I threw out a poll so that they could kind of gauge, whether or not they were getting the right answer. So the options were metabolic acidosis, etc. So they could see how they compared with what their colleagues' understanding was. And so you can see here that if anybody wanted to answer the poll, we'll actually be able to look and see how those responses relate across the folks in the classroom.
How do you access the poll?
It should be visible to you. I put it up on the screen. It's not showing up for you?
All I see is a provide input and audience questions, and it says no questions.
Because here...
I couldn't, yeah.
You can't see it either?
Uh-uh.
Well, now I'm stumped.
Yeah,
So much for technology.
I haven't been giving you feedback, so I know I'm engaged with the program, but Nothing's coming up other than these two
Yeah, I
options.
gave you a question and I saw it come up, but
Yeah.
I don't see anything from you. But it says.
Hey, Lori.
Yes.
Hi, it's Andra in Vancouver.
Hi, Andra.
Hi. So the link that you put up for us just takes us to be able to sign up for Prof, but not what you're doing.
The
Right?
joinprof.com/ELAYBE.
It wouldn't let you do the backslash, but then once I got in there, I put ELA.
You could put in the ELAYBE to search
Yeah,
for me.
yeah,
Did that work?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's funny because when I went in on mine today, ELAYBE with the backslash, and it went straight to it. I wonder if there's a difference in the devices. Did I bring chocolate? No. Is there a limit of a number of participants? Is another one of the questions someone's asking, and there's not. The students, this is all housed on Join Prof. And so if the students signed into my moderated input, and if I forget to close the input, I'll see questions, like today I had, we did acute renal failure and they're getting ready for an exam on Friday. So if I were to open this up tomorrow night, I'll have questions about the exam on Friday, even though we're not in class. So if I don't close it, it'll continue to moderate this discussion. There is a cost, $5 a month for me. So it's free to students, which I really appreciate because they're trying, some of them, to decide between groceries and school fees. And $5 a month is something that I can totally deal with. I mean, it's $60 a year, and it's not limited in terms of the access that I have. So I like that. And can I get reports? Yes, if it would let you all see my poll today, and I'm not sure what my problem is here, it would give me, it would show me this, and then later on, I could go to my polls, to reports, and it would give me my poll results. So as you can see, I haven't had any results yet today, and I'm not sure why it's not showing up for you.
Is that from your class today too? No results today?
We didn't use any polls,
Just for this.
not this one, just not, I erased the ones for today, the input's not there. And so, so how does it work? Really, you just launch it, and then the students get in, and as I'm going through, they ask questions. So, and they can ask anything, and really they will, which is the other nice thing about being able to choose what you actually put up on the screen. One of the students once asked me how many tattoos I had, which I figured was not something for classroom discussion, so I didn't push that one forward to the rest of the students. But if they ask a question about, for instance, delegation is a big topic that we've been discussing recently. And we'll be talking about how to delegate, and a student maybe who's shy or who has a question that they think is stupid, we'll still put that question up here. And to me, that's where some of the biggest value is. And then seeing questions that they have that I thought, I would not have thought that would be a question that I thought we went through this. And so it allows me that real-time view of whether or not we're actually hitting the mark on certain content areas. Where if I were doing this just face-to-face live, there are a lot of students who wouldn't ask those questions. So I do appreciate the anonymity of it. There is on occasion a wish that I could point something out to someone in terms of their professionalism, but then if I did that, I lose the relative safety of the anonymity of their responses and their questions. Am I able to join in Everett? Yeah, my students in Yakima and Tri-Cities all use this across the state. It's not place-based. It's somewhere out on the nebulous, I have no idea where, intranet. And so I'm not sure how it's housed, but they go into that space online and not necessarily place-based, which is the other value for me with my multiple different student sites. Can you share an account if you're teaching with a colleague? Ethically speaking, I'm not sure. Have I in the past for, a once in a while kind of thing where someone needs something on the fly? Yes, but since they do charge for it, I wonder if that's an okay thing to do. But it is password protected. When I go in, I have to put in my password to get into my account. Student questions are anonymous, yes. And so that's do students see everything? No. The students see only what I put out on their on the on-screen part here. So if you're looking at your phones, you should see only what's on the right-hand side of the screen.
And that was my question, because I see nothing on here.
Nothing. Did you click on the audience input?
It's just mine that says no questions. I can show you.
Same.
Here, let me do this. So here's what I get when I go into the student site. So provide question, but why is it not? I wonder why it's not pushing them out. When I do this in the classroom, I don't have this problem. Well, I hate coming to a technology thing and then not knowing that I'm going to have a technology glitch. So there's my student screen now with the poll that I just launched. Do you have can you post another question for me? Yeah, I'm in. Can you see that now? On the student screen. All right, so I'll be on the phone with Join Prof today. I suspect that I did not, in fact, sell any products for them. Why is that? I don't see them. I swear this works without a glitch in my classroom with students. It's only because I'm here with my colleagues. That's what it is, isn't it?
So it's a reciprocal thing. You ask them questions, they can ask you questions.
Right.
And do you use it through your whole lecture? Like
Yeah.
if you're lecturing along, they
Yeah, and ideally what I have going on, because sometimes we do, like I'll post a case up on a PowerPoint because it just makes it easier for them to see on the screen. And I've got my input up here.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking, when we're engaging in a discussion about the case, I'm talking with them and I can see this screen. And so if we come across a point in the discussion where they're struggling, I'll see 5 or 6 questions come up at the same time. Hey, Lori, what about this? Or I'm not really clear on this. And I can launch those questions out. And people can actually, the nice thing is the students can actually vote. So, if they're looking at a question and they say, no, we can't see them, they can hit the like button, and that tells me that there were 10 other students that agree with that question. And so I'm not understanding why I'm having issues today.
They only see that if you push it out.
Yeah, they only see what I push from the moderate side to the on-screen side. They only see those questions that I push out for them to see.
I could see it also being kind of cool if they could see the moderating side, and maybe there's a series of questions, and maybe there's like 10 likes for a certain question.
Right. And the thing about the moderate side is, that it's that one place where I have just a little bit of control over where the discussion goes. Like, someone may have put a question up on the moderate side, and I know that we're getting to that in about 10 minutes. And so rather than launch that question out and kind of get things a little more out of sequence, I might wait and push that question out and say, now let's talk about this, or clarify this.
And did you say they use it as a forum to ask you questions outside of class?
Sometimes, yeah. If I forget to close the session, I'll come back to it 2 days later and there's like 12 questions that have been since I left class. So, they obviously see the benefit and use it pretty routinely in and out of class. And I really love the ability to do the in-class on the fly poll. You know, because if I know I'm getting to something that's going to be a more difficult concept, as we're going through and they're, you know, maybe they're working a case on a given content area, while they're talking, I can throw that poll out, and when we, you know, they can start answering the poll. When we come back together and talk about that case, I then see the results of the poll and can share with them. Say, okay, so a lot of you didn't understand this content area. Let's talk about that a little more. Let's talk about, you know, what do you remember from when, you know, when you were reading or whatever. I can redirect the discussion to bring it back to what the students need. It's Mr. Clark, Bradley Clark. Was that the one who contacted me about this? If I were to send you an email after I figure out what is wrong with this today, would you share with everybody? Because I have never had I'm so embarrassed because I've never had a problem with this. And then of course I come today to plug a tool and it didn't work.
Do you, can you go back into a session after it's closed?
Yeah, if I don't close it, it stays open until forever.
But if you close it,
Mhm.
can you go back into it?
The report
like if you
section,
were gonna plan your class for next year and you want to remember, oh, what were the students getting stuck on? Could you go back and get it?
I've actually done like screenshot or select all and print kind of things on it. But no, I think after you erase the session, if you haven't taken any notes. Now the polls are forever until I take out the results of a poll. They'll stay there for ad infinitum. So, but the students' questions, no. But one of the things that I do after every class anyway is I go back, because if I was going to ask Steve Lampa, I didn't see my animal up there for the animal species. The squirrel wasn't there. And so if I don't write it down, I forget it. So after class, I go and I make some notes about things that, you know, maybe I could do better for the next time I teach that content or something. And I'll use these questions as part of the gauge of, you know, what I need to cover differently when I come back through to this content. So my sincerest apologies that my active show of how this works didn't work the way it was supposed to. But I will get to send a message to Bradley if that's okay and kind of let people know what the heck went wrong. Got a couple of messages. What does the squirrel represent? Have you ever seen the movie Up? Did you see the dog? Dog's running. Squirrel! That's me. Shiny object, instant loss of focus and concentration. So if I don't keep track of things right away, they're gone. They fall off my iceberg and feed the sharks. So are there any questions I can answer other than why I couldn't make it work today?
I got another one, Lori.
Okay. Yeah.
So two little clarifications. What I finally got in, and what I see is on the left side is provide input, which would be all of us, and then on the right-hand side, is that where you edit what audience sees? You decide what you'll put up there? Okay.
Yeah.
So my other question is, does this have capacity to take attendance?
It doesn't, because it is strictly anonymous. There is no way for me to know who's on the other side of that screen.
All the time. Okay.
Yeah, there is absolutely zero way for me to figure out who's on the other side. And like I said, there are times where I really want to know who's who. And there are times when we're really engaged in discussions in class, and those really shy folks or the ESL, they won't ever speak up. But I hear from them all the time with these. Like some of them will come up to me, they put their question in, and then they'll come after class and say, "That was me, thank you." Right? So, they didn't want anybody else to know that they asked that so-called stupid question. And so I get more engagement, I think, from those folks, which is where I see some of the benefit.
Well,
that
and
in
sometimes it's so hard to hear in Yakima or Tri-Cities.
And they're always afraid of interrupting. That's what they always tell me. Although I say polite doesn't matter here. You gotta fend for yourself kind of thing, right? So, but they do. They'll use this to engage with me in a way that maybe they feel less comfortable doing by unmuting their classroom.
Do you have to join for a year at a time?
No. I can drop this anytime. As a matter of fact, I typically stop paying over the summer months.
Okay.
Hi, Lori. This is Mark Beatty over in Everett. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's been a while.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Thanks for sharing this tool with us. This is pretty
No
interesting,
trouble.
actually. Jacob Murray with me. He's in engineering when we teach a lot of AMS classes. So this may find some application for us. Thank you.
I'm glad. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. I have another appointment, so I'm going to wrap this up. And thank you all very much for having me. And Bradley, watch for an email.
Okay, so up next we'll have Lisa Gloss here on the Pullman campus present. We'll get her set up and ready to go.
I think so. Is it? At the other sites, can you see the computer? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes to which question? Can you hear me?
We can see the content and we can hear you.
All right, then I'll get going. So I'm Lisa Gloss. I'm in the School of Molecular Biosciences. I'm a biochemist. I've been teaching a 2-semester biochemistry series, conjoint 413, 513, and 414, 514, for probably about 18 years. And about 4 years ago, we decided to flip the classroom. I had co-taught it for many years with Bill Davis. The last 3 years I've been teaching on my own. And Bill and I decided to flip the course. And that was successful, and our plummeting performance improved. But then I switched to team-based learning. And so I would give quizzes to assess whether the students had prepared before class, before they'd come into class. And then Eric Mazura, a year or so ago, came and gave a seminar at WSU and presented the platform that he had developed, Perusal. And so I've done a test run on it, and I'd like to present it to you. I'm not as courageous as the previous speakers, Steve and Lori, so I'm going to give you screenshots. I'm not going to try to log into the system, but if you want to go in, the URL is down at the bottom of this. It's Perusal, Perusall.com. And if you log in, the code to get into the class that I'll describe is gloss-7676. Okay? So what this is a social networking reading platform developed by Eric Mazur, who's a renowned physics professor at Harvard. And the premise is that learning is a social activity, or is at least enhanced by social activity. People learn better in groups than in solitary, okay? And so there are various ways that we can achieve this in the classroom, and some of that's been discussed in the previous 2 talks, but also examples would include active learning, team-based learning, POGIL, Think, Pair, Share. We all have various different ways of doing this. But in an active learning classroom that's coupled with a flipped classroom where you want students to prepare beforehand, either by reading or by watching videos, this tends to be a solitary activity. So how can we bring that benefit of interaction in learning to these pre-class environments? And that's where Dr. Mazur came up with the idea of parlaying the power and attraction of online social networking, which certainly our current generations of students are very comfortable with. How can we incorporate that productively into the classroom? So what he developed is Perusal, which is a collaborative online reading format, okay? And he's presented many webinars. There's a Facebook page about it. You can go to Perusal and look up all the information there. So I'm going to focus on giving you an overview. I think you have my name and my contact information if you just go to the search for me on WSU. I'm happy to answer more in-depth questions during this presentation as well as afterwards, but I'm just going to give an overview. Okay? So what does it do? From Dr. Mazur's statistics, it means most students come to class more prepared and have completed the reading assignments. So for example, when we started this flipped class format, we would give pre-class quizzes. And then I have the students come in and work as a team to do the quiz. Yeah, they don't necessarily do all the reading. They look at the quiz, figure out which sections they need to read, study that. They don't do a whole in-depth reading of all the material, okay? With this, we get higher percentage of the students reading. 90% of the students from his statistics read every assignment before class, and also the assignment readings have to be distributed throughout the reading. They can't just cherry pick various sections where you've asked a question, okay? And I have certainly seen, and this is one of his selling points, is that students are more motivated. You can give a small point value, say 10% of your grade is for participating in the pre-class readings. They're engaged, and they're able to provide feedback to you as the instructor before class on what is unclear. So they're going to go through and read the assignment, and they have the ability to make comments, ask questions, whatever, and you can actually see that before lecture. So you can spend your time focusing on the sections of the lecture that were not clear, rather than those things that they pretty much everybody got. So for me, the selling points why I decided to do this is that it's free for any PDF lectures that you create. So I was planning to use it for lecture notes. In the flipped classroom, I have a PowerPoint slide, and then below that I've typed out what I would say if I were giving this as a lecture. And I can convert those to a PDF. I post them on Blackboard. What I'm going to do next year is actually provide these through Perusal so they can read them interactively before class instead of just on their own. If you want to use a textbook, Perusal will work with the publishers to obtain the ebook, and this is generally cheaper for students. For me, since I'm teaching majors, the one downside of it is the ebook often has limited access. They can get a one-year subscription. Well, if they're going to go on for a lifetime career in biochemistry, they might want to have access to Leninger for more than a year. Okay? That is one sort of downside to it. Cheaper, but limited access. Okay? It is minimal work for the instructor to set up. Once you log into the site, you can just click and drag your PDF files, a couple minutes to set up access and the various parameters you want to it for access to the things. The big point for me that I'll go through a little bit more detail is you get automated evaluation. It gives you automated grading of the student's response. I'll say how that's graded in a few minutes. And it also gives you can get a pre-class confusion report. So you can identify the various points in the readings where students had the most questions. Okay, so if my class is about 50 students, it's not that hard to read all of the comments. But if you had a class of 200 students and every student's required to put in 5 to 7 comments, there's no way you're going to read them all before class, but it has very good data analytics to go through and pull out what were the sections that were confusing to students. Where should you be focusing your efforts during class, and what were their specific questions? Okay? So my test run on this, as great as all this sounded, I wasn't ready to go, having learned about it last summer, I wasn't ready to go live in fall 2016. So I decided to do a test run on an extra credit assignment that I'd used the previous year. So as part of the College of Veterinary Medicine Teaching Academy Summer Journal Club, we'd read the book Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning by Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of messages in here that my students really would benefit from. It's a biochemistry class, can I really make this an assignment? I'll just give it as a benefit as extra credit. So I did this in the fall semester, the 413, 513 class. I first did this in fall 2015, where what I did as for assessment is I had them write 1 to 2 page reflection essays. For me, with about 20 to 30 students making reading every 20 weeks or every 2 weeks, this was a lot of grading and reading. So I gave them feedback, but not a lot of feedback. And the only interaction they got was between what they thought and what I thought of what they thought. So it wasn't really interactive. So between the grading and the lack of interaction, I decided, well, let's try this on Perusall. So I went into Perusall. If you're there, I don't know how many of you have logged into the site, but there are a number of different parameters that you can set up. You can set up how long they can see it, how many comments they have to make to receive full credit, what's their due date, can they turn it in late, what have you. All those things can be determined by you as the instructor. I required 7 annotations per chapter. That seemed, based on the length of the chapter, pretty good. Students didn't have a problem with that. And it also requires that annotations be distributed throughout the reading. So if they only read the first 2 pages and make 7 comments, they're not going to get full credit. Okay? So you can sort of force them to read the entire article. And it also has this automated grading that it goes through each of the annotations and rates them. And when they were setting up this software, they had their algorithm rate things, and then they had individual humans go through and rate the comments. And there was very good agreement. And I could say when I went through and read the students' comments and rated them on a 0 to a 3-point scale, I was impressed. I would have given exactly the same ratings. So it'll give you comments of 0 for it's just a, yo, I checked in, I did not making any particularly intelligent statement about this, to 1, the students have thought about it, there's some level of thought, but it's relatively superficial. It's not really in depth, versus 2, a commoner question that demonstrates a thoughtful reading and interpretation of the text. And what I was amazed is that most of my students' comments were at the level of 2. They were really making thoughtful analyses of these. Whereas when I'd done the reflection essays, they really weren't that thoughtful. But maybe it's because it's, they know their peers are reading it and what have you. Because they didn't have to string together a whole paper, they could make individual comments. I found that their comments were much more insightful. And again, you can set deadlines. For this, I let them submit throughout the semester. I tried to get them to do it every couple weeks, but they could submit it all the way through the end. It's just if they didn't read till the last part of the semester, they only got partial credit. Whereas if they were reading the book all the way through, they got more credit. So here's my attempt at technology, which is working. So you can see on the left-hand side is just an excerpt from one of the pages out of the first chapter of the reading. And it highlights different sections, different students' comments. There are about 4 different ones here in different colors. And then over on this side, you see all your buttons. You can look at individual conversations. You can look at various threads. You can look at all the comments. And you can see here, what you notice is there are, about 10 different comments that were on this one page. And you can see the number of comments, or 10 different threads and the number of comments. So we have some with only a couple. One person made a comment, one person made a response. There are others where we got much more questions. And I was actually reading this last night again and realized these students were really quite interactive. I hadn't picked up on that. They got less toward the end of the semester. Here we have a comment with, a comment and 3 different responses for about 20 students. So we got pretty good interaction between the students. And there are various, again, a lot of different features that you can go through. I'm happy to discuss those in more detail, probably when you're logged in and I'm logged in, we can talk about. So my takeaway lessons were the positives compared to when I had the extra credit readings, they had to write a reflection essay. I had about the same percentage of students in the class, about 40% of the students participated in the extra credit reading. But the grading work for me was a lot less work. It was also, I felt, more objective. It was more objective. It wasn't, did they say something that I liked or did they say something I didn't like? This was more about what the content was. I thought the comments were more insightful than in essays. And also we had dialogue between the students. And I thought the automated grading was quite accurate. The disappointments is I had variable level of student interaction discussion. Some students were quite interactive, others just went in, put their comments, didn't ask questions, whatever. They've upgraded the system, and I think now I can go in and require them to put in a question. If they want full credit, some of their annotations must require questions, must require responses to other statements. Also, if I had been more proactive, instead of just going in at the end, if I had been going in routinely and adding seating comments or something like that or responding, I think I could have been more engaged. I sort of just let the students go. I didn't want to interfere. I think if there had been more engagement on my part, I could have prompted even better conversations. For this, I didn't find the confusion report at all useful. And I think it was more the nature of the reading. It wasn't hardcore science like they're discussing in class. It was more about how to learn and their preconceived notions and what those were. So I don't think that's a fault of the proposal or the perusal. I think it's a fault of the way I used it. From the student perspective, I collected their response through an anonymous survey that I submitted via Blackboard. I got about 95% of the students responding to it. I asked a number of different questions. Of those who responded, 70% indicated that they had used Perusal. And of those, 61% agreed or strongly agreed that they felt Perusal was helpful. Okay, so to me, that's the way I'm going to do the extra credit readings, and I did it the next semester as well. Only about 58%, so slightly less, thought it would be useful for lecture note readings. So when I got this result in December, I wasn't ready to go whole hog in doing my lecture notes. And I couldn't, I'll come back to some other reasons why I didn't proceed, but I think this is strong enough buy-in that it's worth considering down the road and moving forward with that. So my second attempt at Perusal was again extra credit readings, and I'd done this the year before in the second semester, where now I've got a smaller class. I've got about 30 students. Pretty much all of them are biochemistry majors, so they're much more focused. So now I wanted to move the extra credit readings into reading the literature. So we covered a topic like lipoxygenases. And we go in this much in depth. I want to provide them reading where they can go much more in depth into that and give them extra credit for that. I'm not going to hold them responsible for that, but here's your practice at reading the literature. So I chose several papers from the primary literature that expanded on topics that we'd covered in class that they would find relevant, biomedically relevant or biotechnology relevant. Okay? And again, I'd done this the previous year and said, okay, you choose a paper from this list of 5 papers, write me a 1-page summary and analysis of it. This became a very large, complicated grading load. And again, there was not the interaction between students. Their only interaction came back from my feedback, which I didn't have a lot of time to give, given the number of papers. So my takeaway lessons were the positives. In this, where it was pretty much related to course material, I saw much more interactions. I saw much more discussion, asking of questions, students answering questions. I thought it meant this. No, I thought it meant this. Much more interaction between the students. I think the questions could have been a little bit more rigorous. However, here I only had limited participation. Instead of 35 students or so participating, I only had about 10 students who participated. That may well have been my fault as how I scheduled it. Okay? The comments, again, were much more insightful than the individual essays. And I think that was, again, spawned by the fact that it was a sort of discussion and interaction between the students. And again, here I had fewer students, so I went through and read all of the comments. I thought they were much more insightful. The disadvantage, again, I had fewer students involved, and I think that's more a tweaking of my scheduling of it and how I do that. And again, I think here I should have been more proactive. I could have, and this is a feature that you can do in Perusal, you can go in and say, okay, here's a key point. You know, this is something I want you to comment on. You could ask, you can seed it with questions. You can put your comments in as well. I think for literature papers, which are fairly high level for these students, that would have been a helpful guide to what to focus on. Because I found some students focusing on the materials and methods like, no, that's not what I want. You know, here's the hardcore data. No, not that data, this data. This is what I want you to focus on. I think that would have made this more productive. Okay? So my take-home message, big picture, is I think this is a very useful tool, particularly if you're using a classroom environment where you want to ensure that the students come in with at least some level of preparation. Quizzes are useful for that, for assessing their understanding, but this is a way to also allow them to engage in it more interactively. So my thoughts for the next year are, to make this work, I need to set aside more time each week to go in and look at the readings, look at the comments, look at the questions, or when I post the reading through Perusal, the PDF, I can already go in and seed it with questions and comments to give them a guide of what to focus on, what to make comments about, what to question. I can also alter scoring parameters to require that they ask questions. They can't just say, I had one student that would have gone, well, according to my research, I thought this. Next page. According to my research, I thought that. There wasn't a lot of integration and interrogation of the material. So I can redo the scoring parameters so that they're requiring them to ask questions and to respond to questions. My big challenge, and where I'd be delighted to hear discussion, and why I didn't move into Perusal for the spring semester, is I need to figure out how to use this for lecture notes. It's fine for an individual paper, but if it's something that you want them to be reading as they go through the course, it works best, and this is the way Eric Mazur does it. They have a reading, a big chunk of reading, that then they will spend a whole week discussing. So they do the reading up front, the comments up front, and then you might spend a couple days in class going through that. I have not figured out how to do that the way I've always presented lectures the last 18 years, where it's pretty much topic 1 on this day, topic 2 on that day, to give them sort of a more integrated, holistic reading that then we can work on it in class throughout that. So that's the major reason I did not use it for this semester, okay? So if I can need to figure out my format for lecturing better to make it more grouped, so I could have a reading due on Monday, and then we could have Tuesday or Wednesday and Friday to work through questions in that. So I gave a low-tech presentation, but I'm very happy to answer any questions or discuss this method with people. And I've left time for the last speaker. Any questions from the other campuses?
Yeah, we do in Everett. So you're using a third-party website platform for grading student work. How does that fall into like FERPA regulations and things like that?
There's no problem with, to my knowledge, there's no problem with it. And this has been used at a number of different universities. Ohio State University, I know, has helped develop it, Harvard and that. The only question I have about FERPA is I opened it up to you, so if you logged in, you might be able to see student names. I will close that down after this session. But the grading is only viewable by the faculty, and you can integrate it through Blackboard. Like Steve, I was a little bit, I don't want to go that high tech, and it will export the grades as an Excel file, and I just use that to import into my grading system. But as far as I know, there's no issue with FERPA. Other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. So next we'll have Demetrius Abshire. He's going to be presenting from the Spokane campus on Kahoot.
Created Kahoot really just for illustrative purposes. You'll be able to create your own with the content that's specific to your needs, but there are many others out there that are just kind of fun to do. And this Kahoot is about identifying different foods. So you can see, if you're looking at my screen, it's loading. You can see at the bottom, it's loading the actual, this is called a Kahoot. So a Kahoot is sort of a term that represents, it's an individual game. And so I'm going to tell it, I want the classic mode, player versus player, using devices. You'll get to this screen, and you'll see number now.
Demetrius, are we supposed to be logged in?
Yes. Yes, you have to put the in first.
Demetrius, I'm sorry, if there's a way that you could turn down the music, that's all we can hear here in Pullman.
does play this cutesy little music that I don't know if we can turn that off or not. But what you would want to do if you were using this for attendance purposes is just be certain that the students do enter in their real name if that's the way you're wanting to use it. And then at the end of the Kahoot you create, you will be able to download the data about who was participating. So we'll go through, so each Kahoot, so for this one it's a Kahoot that consists of 10 questions. And you have 10 seconds to answer what is the name of this food that's popular in Canada. And you hit the corresponding icons on your device. This is how we know who are the food connoisseurs in the conference. So now you can see here, you can see that 6 people got this correct. 3 people called it garlic fingers. And so this gives me an idea if this was something a little bit more meaningful, you could get a quick snapshot about the proportion of your class that's understanding the particular content. You also, so whoever is DRM, so now you can see that the point total is based upon the quickness with which you respond and the correctness, an indicator of correctness and speed. So it rewards those who correctly answer the question faster. So someone may be familiar with spaghetti, who identified that one. What is the name of this Mexican food? And we'll just do a couple of more of these just so you can get the feel of it. So most everyone got that one, and we'll stop after this one. So you'll notice now, our leaderboard is changing. I think the students tend to find this kind of exciting because they tend to know. Typically, a handful know who is responding, and so they kind of cheer each other on. And the person who drops it out, it's like, oh yeah, you got to pick it back up. And particularly during the later stages where some folks clearly aren't in the running anymore, it can be a very fun environment. These questions are pretty simplistic. You could create more scenario-based options. There is a limit, and I don't know this off the top of my head. There's a character limit for each of your options. So you would need to carefully think about what types of questions may be appropriate for your, for the Kahoot that you create. All right, so, and finally, so we can see our leaderboard changed after every question. And again, I think the students, and it also will tell you, it'll give you, like if so-and-so had a particular streak, maybe they answered 10 questions correctly, it'll tell you that. So, I think I find it a fun activity. So just real quickly, I have a little more to go through, but any thoughts about, was that easy to use, difficult to use? Any initial thoughts about that?
That's the one technology that's worked perfectly this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, right. And and it's worked in every class that I've done, and so I think that is, so that's been a perk for me, is you avoid that frustration because it does tend to work pretty well, and it works pretty equally well across sites. So there's not a lag time. And again, students can participate on any device that they may have. I think from my from a faculty perspective, I've shared with you, my initial impressions. It's good for some types of questions, not so much for others. And I like to, I'm always talking in terms of football analogies, and you'll hear people talk about a wrinkle in the playbook. Well, this is just a wrinkle for me that I add in. I don't use it every class. I just use it in a couple of classes. It mixes it up a little bit, and my feedback has been, pretty overwhelmingly positive. I'm continuing to evolve in terms of how much processing I do in between questions. I think for me that's become a critical part of it, not just rushing through, but actually going through, seeing what the students are understanding, seeing maybe where there's a level of disagreement, and then pausing and having a thoughtful discussion. And it really, it ends up taking quite a bit more time than you would think, because it stimulates some really nice discussion. So just very briefly, it's really simple to use. So if you can see in the top left-hand side of the screen, it says, new K exclamation mark. That just tells you that that's where you go if you wanted to create your specific Kahoot, how many questions you want. There's different settings in there about how much time you want per question. There's several options here. I've only done the quiz options. I'm not playing around with these other two. So it sounds like with what Lori mentioned earlier, there was options for some discussion, and you could do some survey-based Kahoots as well. So just a quick screenshot of, you enter in the title of what your Kahoot's going to be. You can add a description. You can tell it who you want it to be visible to. You can add an introductory video. I think you can actually even add video to the questions. I've not gone that far into it. So here's where you can enter in the timing. You can enter in the responses. Yeah, you can add an image or video there. So I use this for a class on complementary and alternative remedies. And so, for example, I may have an image of garlic, for example, and the students, have to pick that out. That's more of a basic level which you can do it, but you could add any kind of image that maybe is a better example than I just gave you there. So that's all I have. I'll be glad to take any other questions that you all may have.
Have you noticed that the different devices have an advantage over the other? Like a laptop being better than a cell phone? Or
no.
Jacob beat me on the laptop every time because I was on a cell phone.
Yeah, and those are kind of the fun things that come about in the class too. And it's a little, those conversations. I mean, I don't really find them distracting. I actually think, for me, it's. If I know that this is class content that is an objective and I need to cover it, but it's not the most, our students in the College of Nursing, they're interested in putting in catheters, starting IVs, so for them to be talking about issues surrounding culture and diversity, it's kind of lower on their list of priorities. So anything that I can do to engage them, even if it is a little bit deviant at times, I'm a little more okay with.
I would just reiterate what you said, because I tried it once this semester as well, and I think the best part was the discussion in between, and I hear here's we've split answers. Right. Why did some people answer this way? So why did some people answer that way? And having that discussion about, and just being able to reinforce concepts that they were confused about.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to pause for just 1 minute while we get the next recording ready to go. But up next from the Vancouver campus will be Carolyn Long and Claire Weber. So we'll just pause for 1 moment, and I'll let you know when we're ready to get started with the next recording.